Welcome back. We are going to touch on a couple things today, and I want to start with the NBA's new CBA, new hot topic, and it's not going to be about the nuts and bolts, but I want to discuss and postulate some of the potential downstream implications for not just the financial arm or element of how teams make decisions, but how they approach building good teams and how they employ good strategies, that kind of stuff. 3 million foot view of the objective and context of the new CBA. I'm not even going to touch on any of the specific elements, but very succinctly, what its objective is. It's to prevent high spending owners from dominating the playing field through overspending for good talent and rendering a worse product. Where does it come from? Well, it comes from the Golden State Warriors in the 2010s. Did a great job assembling a really great homegrown cast of players, but just like all things, there comes a payday. Of course, what their owner did, seeing all of their success, you really just can't care. He just rightfully kept spending, ultimately meaning that they were getting themselves to the finals every single year. And the Cavs obviously didn't need to break the bank because they had the best player in the league. That's what ultimately incited this new idea. And so what it is at the highest level, I really like the way that I heard it phrased, is it basically introduces strategic penalties on top of the pre-existing financial ones that were in the form of luxury tax, which is kind of weird because when you pay the luxury tax, you pay your employer who then pays you and the players. So you're just kind of pay everyone more money. Maybe one of the reasons why it wasn't super effective to begin with. Ultimately, it wasn't. And that was a concern thinking about the product back in the 2010s. Even though viewership was up, it was kind of useless, especially if you're a player. Like, why are we even competing this year? Because it's obviously going to be Golden State, Cleveland. Yeah, that's not awesome. And so the different spending limits or thresholds called aprons, if you cross them, you are just introduced to more strategic penalties. That's where you get the wild draft picks in like X number of years that gets moved to the end of the first round of the draft. If you're over the second apron for multiple years, or you can't combine salaries and all those things. These are very meaningful strategies and practices that owners and GMs utilize to build and accumulate talent and sustain good core and casts and continue competing. Those are really important things to take away from a team. Essentially ups the trade-off of being good now from the future, because you are just really, really limiting yourself down the line if you continue to stay above that second apron threshold. Why the CBA makes a lot of sense if you're the NBA. Not enough people are pumping the brakes and actually thinking about it. There's a lot of just what is it and what is happening. Oh my God, Jalen Brunson just took less money. That's going to be the thing. Yeah, but there are also going to be other things if you actually cared enough to think about it. Given the severity of the trade-offs and the penalties for going over the second apron, teams are just going to be less willing to hold on to really talented players that are eligible for really big contracts. What does that mean? There is basically a redistribution of wealth or talent around the league, which is why guys like Bill Simmons and other prominent media members, funny enough, just from very competitive teams right now, whining about, oh my God, if you draft really well, you shouldn't have to pay the taxes. We're entitled to keep the guys together. First of all, if you take the fan hat off and you put on the CEO hat, you're still hoarding talent. Doesn't necessarily matter that your team is entitled to hold on to stuff. When you look across the league more holistically and strategically, homegrown or not, hoarding talent is a problem. And if you introduce mechanisms for teams that do a better job drafting and developing talent in an increasingly talented playing field, you're gonna end up in the same exact scenario. So the idea of more localized fandom, not just Celtics fans, but NBA fans, in the event of something like, oh my God, Jaylen Brown had to get traded after they won their first title and he was finals MVP and now he's on the Wizards. Now you're gonna get a shit ton of people from Boston following the Wizards and just helping them get more eyes on their games and kind of supporting them in a way. And if you're the CEO or commissioner, that is a good thing. It helps raise the overall tide of talent in the league league and keep things competitive on both ends, more prioritization of drafting and developing young talent because they're on cheap contracts. If you can identify guys that fit your brand of basketball that are coming into the draft, take the time and money to do so, there is a bigger upside and benefit of doing so because you're not crushing your overall roster spending. Similar to that, there is a greater prioritization of team level strategy. What does that mean? It means that you can't afford to go out star hunting anymore. You actually have to work with what you got and innovate new schemes to be successful. This is where Oklahoma City to me comes to mind because everybody loves to say, oh my God, man, Sam Presti just murdered this whole team and he deserves all the praise for all this. No, he doesn't, because in addition to identifying good prospects and developing them, he also got Mark Dagnall in there, coach of the year, who employed and innovated very effective frameworks for utilizing young, undersized guys to get to the second round of the playoffs. Being able to be innovative and concoct different ways for being successful, given what you got, is really the other side of the coin that never gets talked about, because it's not as simple anymore as, oh, let me just pick the most talented guy in the draft and just throw him out there and let him just organically evolve into a dominant player. No, it's high upside guy that is going to drive value within the system that you have in place, and it's going to propel it even further or define it. And that difference matters. And that's why I ultimately think coaching is just going to be a lot more important. You're not allowed to just lean on star players anymore, and you have to basically utilize what you have and be smarter about that. In this incubation period, especially as guys adjust to, oh my God, you're not gonna give me my max money and yada yada, the player coach idea I think is also gonna be more important as well, because you have to get guys to buy into roles. Guys have to understand if they come in from the outside later on, you're playing a part of a pre-existing system, and this is what we need you to do. Getting them to buy into that is going to be absolutely essential. Obviously, you're going to just have more competition for those rarer and rarer max and super max contracts for your young players. That means there's more prestige for being a franchise cornerstone. And so that overall competition should produce just better players. You can't just walk in, yeah, I'm super athletic, super talented, where's my money at? No, it's if you want this max deal, you actually need to grow and develop and show investment in what we're doing, take us seriously, show us respect. Looking at you, Zion, means you have guys that are just going to have to commit more. Assuming we're not going to get a million more Wembys. That would be probably the only caveat possible. Similarly, I wouldn't be surprised if we just get a spike in those no trade clause, at least requests, because even max guys up for a contract extension or a new contract completely, it can't just be an assumed given that you're just gonna get it anymore because of the potential risks of getting up to that second apron. If you're not delivering enough value, you are going to get what you deserve. If they are going to offer you a deal in an environment that is increasingly encouraging redistributing talent as a result of some of these trade-offs, guys are not going to feel as confident that they are going to remain in the systems that they are, living where they are, yada yada. That kind of protection is going to be in their best interest. Obviously, it is completely the opposite for the franchise itself, because what you don't want to happen is Bradley Beal or Zach LaVine, because now you are absolutely saddled with a star that grew to hate you / isn't really helping your team meaningfully win or improve. I think we're gonna get more of what happened with Paul George, where yeah, he was disrespected for the initial offer, whatever it was. The straw that broke the camel's back, he requested a no trade clause, and they were like, hell no, we're not gonna do that. Even though they'd been pitching, we want you to retire a Laker and all of this stuff. I actually think that this is really notable because Paul George just walked. Chris Paul just walked. At least a card that these franchise players can play as far as, hey, if you're serious about what you're doing, and I know that I have a really good market out there like Paul George did, put it in writing in the deal. What are we even talking about? And if you won't, I'm just going to take the money. And so that to me is probably what we're just going to see more and more. And then similarly with the Chris Paul thing, waiving him and letting him walk for nothing, essentially the same thing with Klay Thompson. A lot of people just get that misconstrued as a bad management decision or practice or incompetence, but the Warriors were going to have to re-sign Chris Paul for $30 million, and if they were going to trade him to a bad team, most likely, that would be willing to take on the contract, they were going to have to match the salaries in a potential trade, and then they're more than likely going to get pretty bad assets back as well that are just taking up even more roster spending. So letting guys walk is just going to be more common, and I believe that the attempts at getting no trade clauses in place as a mechanism for really good players to call out their franchises to just show them this level of trust, I think is also going to go up too. The analysis of all of those just initial implications I've just been thinking a lot about, I think can be analyzed this way. The league wants to make itself more competitive to get more fans in the door for the broader chessboard as opposed to individual franchises. If you can broaden the net of possibly getting new fans in the door or just new fans of new players on new teams or on their original teams, whatever, it all feeds into ultimately boosting profitability for the broader league. Why the GMs, the owners, the Players Association agreed to it, because if the league makes more money, so do them. The strategic innovation stuff at the team level is by far the most interesting things to me, because basically teams are going to have to do better with what they have, and they can't necessarily go out, star hunt, rely on them to just carry the team. I'm looking at you, Darvin Ham. I already mentioned the OKC thing, but what Mark Daigneault was able to do with sound prospecting and drafting is exactly what teams have to do. It's exactly what it's going to take. Also just gonna see a lot of these guys have to be two-way players more. If you're in a more competitive pool to begin with, you need to fight for minutes to get a better contract, to show what you can do. These guys like Aaron Nesmith, Alex Caruso, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Keon Ellis in Sacramento, this whole two-way player thing is just gonna have to be the norm, because you can't, again, rely on Rudy Gobert to cover up for 4 other terrible perimeter defenders and think that you're going to stand a chance at beating an actual well-orchestrated and designed team. I'm going to read you something that I wrote that I think does a good job of putting a bow on this entire outlook. As the league's tide of talent continues to rise and the CBA redistributes said talent more and more, and star power systems evolve into more egalitarian ones, stars, not superstars, but stars, will dissipate. So then Team Nuclei will play musical chairs with the remnants of a squashed middle class of NBA players, increasingly resembling an army of Derek White.